Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to start off today with a quick recap from yesterday. I talked a little bit about the drought that's impacting parts of Mexico down through Central America and its influence on the shipping through the Panama Canal. And after I put that in my video and tweeted a little bit about it, my good friend Ken Dahlmeyer sent me this great website, which I'm going to link below so you can have access to it too. It's called Marine Traffic. It just kind of shows you global shipping, and it's absolutely amazing. I looked at it for hours yesterday just because I thought it was fantastic, but you can kind of zoom in anywhere you want. So I can zoom back into the Panama Canal here and just kind of show you some of that traffic as it gets stacked up around the canal. And what's nice about it is you can click on any of the ships, like I showed you all of these kind of here, and it'll tell you what they're up to. For example, this one here, there's its name, its flag of origin, but it is currently at anchor. So it's just kind of a way to show you what's going on in parts of the world. So it is important to note, I guess this is a really important point, that even though I talked a bit about the backup here on the Panama Canal, do note that the rest of the world shipping is still moving. I mean, take a look at this. It's incredible to see that. Okay, on to the weather here. Now, this morning as the sun was rising, the thunderstorm complexes that kind of rolled through this area yesterday really, in my opinion, outdid themselves. This was a lot of rainfall out of this front, more than I think I anticipated. If I take you back to yesterday, I can show you just as the storms were blowing up. So you can see the deeper low up here in the upper Midwest. Look at the front ripping off storms all the way down, almost to El Paso. Sorry, I got a new satellite image there. There we go. And these storms at times did produce some hail, some straight line wind gusts. And the other part of this was, I didn't really see this, I think, yesterday in my forecast, so it's important to note on satellite. You can see the extent of the wildfire smoke still getting pulled on the back side of this over parts of Montana and the northern plains and the Canadian prairie here. So just impressive to see what was happening on the backside of that low. But as it rolled through, let me just show you some of the radar data here. This animation goes back about 10, 11 hours here, and so you can see the storms. Look at this coming through parts of Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas. And as it resets here and plays again, some of the storms that came through parts of Illinois produced some locally heavy rain. We had a mesoscale convective vortex out ahead of this. And this thunderstorm complex this morning is working its way through parts of Indiana, out of Wisconsin, and into Michigan. Now, over the last 3 days, I just want to show you some of the hail because we had some hail reports that were here in parts of the northern plains. We also had the storms last night producing some hail down in parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and some spotty areas down here in Texas with some smaller hail. So it's just kind of good to get a quick update on what these storms were capable of doing. But in total, this is our last 72 hours of accumulated precip, and almost all of this is from the same storm system. You had some storms that were out ahead of it here in the lower Mississippi River Valley, but this was all from that deeper trough we talked about over the weekend, finally making its way out. It's going to continue to press on toward the north and eastern part of the U.S. here, and then into Canada throughout the rest of this week. Now, what's important about each one of these fronts, because you can see here this morning, the temperature change behind them is significant. We have some places that are 10 to 20 degrees cooler this morning than they were yesterday morning because of the presence of that front. But what's really important about these fronts is going to be how there's multiple ones coming through, how fronts like this one are going to interact with the tropical system here named Lee that is going to be making its way toward the United States. So in yesterday's video, we made this case that the current timing of Lee with these troughs of low pressure and cold fronts coming through was such that we anticipated, based on evidence yesterday, that Lee would not make it to U.S. coastline. Let's go have just a new look at some of the new data and see what we think now. So the National Hurricane Center's 5 a.m. update right now puts Lee just barely below hurricane status at 65 mile an hour winds. At 74 mile an hour winds, it'll be upgraded to a hurricane, and that should happen later today. The current 5-day cone puts Lee somewhere north of Puerto Rico, pretty far north of Puerto Rico here, about 5 degrees north of Puerto Rico by the time we get into early next week. So the question will always be what that 7 to 10 day forecast looks like. Is there evidence to have this system steer toward the East Coast or maybe toward the Bahamas and Florida, or will it make this turn and possibly come closer to Bermuda? So we just need to keep talking about this to kind of watch the evolution of this system. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to, again, one of my favorite websites, Tomerberg's website, really great one here. And I just wanted to look at a couple of things. First of all, let's check out the intensity forecast. So this is the spread from all of the different models here that you can see on the potential strength of this. And let's just get an eye down here on the NHC, the National Hurricane Center. They've got this getting up to Category 4 and approaching Category 5 in strength. And the reason for that, there's not a whole lot of shear out ahead of it, and the ocean temperatures are still quite warm. So it's a very supportive environment for a tropical system to evolve here. The latest updates from the super blend. So people always ask, well, what models are you going to show? Well, I'm showing the European, the GFS, the UK Met Office, and the Canadians. It's all in this. We're just kind of looking at the full blend of the models, and you can see the colors telling you which one is the deterministic track. That's what we call the main run, the operational run. All of the smaller lines are the ensembles. So here we go. We're out 5 days now, so pretty good tight clustering on where this will likely be. The UK Met being farthest to the south, the European being farthest north, and the ensemble mean just splitting the difference here. And as we play forward, this gets you all the way out there to 192 hours. So we're out there at day 8 looking at where this is going to be. Now you can see the spread is growing, okay? And there's some uncertainty with where this is going to go. Most, as you can see here, most ensemble members are making this turn to the north. And as we explained yesterday, a lot of this was going to be because of the presence of a frontal boundary and a trough that's going to pull this with its upper level winds in this direction. There's also going to be a ridge of high pressure that sits right in through here, and that's going to be the I think the wild card with this will be the timing of this trough and the placement of that high. Should this high move this direction, and should the trough be late in arriving, then we could just see this getting closer to the U.S. coast. But we don't have overwhelming evidence that this is going to hit the U.S. right now. So I know there's a lot of folks out there in social media tossing a lot of hype about this. I am telling you what we know, and that's all. This is it. So let's not try to make conjecture about where this could possibly be past what we currently understand about it. Here's the thing I don't like about the trending and the forecast. I haven't looked at this in a while for you, but I should look at it and show it to you more often. It's global atmospheric angular momentum, and it's the vertical and zonal integral. So we're looking up, and we're only looking in the west-east direction. So wherever you see these numbers where they dip down negative, that means there's more meridional flow. There's weaker zonal, meaning west to east, and more meridional, meaning north and south. So whenever you see more of these blue-green colors showing up, this represents an atmosphere, if I could just draw over the top of this, where the jet stream's a bit more, amplified, loopy, rather than spinning straight, or not spinning, but flying straight out of the west to the east. That's what we're looking at here. So if we continue to see momentum being pulled out of the northern hemisphere especially, then the concern becomes what might happen to the forward speed of these troughs and ridges I keep talking about. So I want to show it to you by going to the mid-levels of the atmosphere. We're going to look here at 500 millibar winds. Now as we play this forward, what we see is the ridge gets pulled down into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and the flow comes crashing over the top of it this weekend right here. So this is going to bring in some cooler weather into this area. As we then play it out Saturday into Sunday, this is what we're going to be keeping an eye on. So full jet streak here, second one in this area. We have this highly amplified, there it is, see it, ridge. So see how much that runs up like that versus being a bit more zonal like this one or this one. And here's the trough that's going to have a front associated with it here at the surface that we want to see if it's going to interact with what will then be Hurricane Lee. All right. So as we play this forward, going out to next Tuesday and Wednesday, that front should be at the base of this trough right down here with high pressure building in behind it there, flow coming around that high like this. Here's the high that's out over the open Atlantic. That's the one that's helping to steer Lee in this direction. But right now, the timing is such that by next Wednesday into Thursday, this front should be a formidable barrier preventing Lee from slamming into the Carolinas, for example. So it's the timing of this front and this trough, which we've now seen a couple of days evidence of, being in this position, that's going to be critical. Should this slow at all, or should it go through much faster and go over the top of Lee, then Lee has a chance of staying farther to the south and hitting the United States. We just don't have strong evidence of that yet. So as I play this forward, I'll take you out there to next Thursday. Let's just park it. How about this? This is next Thursday night. There's the trough of colder air. Here's the jet stream leaving. Here's the flow coming into the west. So what about a multi-model comparison here? So we're out here 0Z on Friday. Let's flip this over to the GFS ensemble to see what it thinks. So the 6Z run is now in, and you see a similar setup. And this is what's left of Lee right here. So yes, it is close to the United States, and it might brush, along the New England, possibly. But I'm still thinking that we're on the lower probability side of this at this point of that occurring. And the GFS model, again, compared to the European model, if the European model has it right and these winds are this strong, then there's even a smaller chance that it comes close to the U.S. coast. So that's really what we're taking in here. Now, before I go any further with the hurricane, I want to give you some of the longer range perspective, because you get out here, past day 10, day 11, 12, and what we do see the jet stream doing is parking a larger ridge down here, flows coming into British Columbia, but it's kind of diving into the U.S. And that particular setup is one that does not, it can't get hot here in this particular type of setup. So we're going to see, again, we talked about it yesterday, but a bit of a busted forecast for those mid-month temperatures now, because we expect cooler weather in this particular area with heat really anchored where the ridge is, kind of back into this region. Okay, next, I got a comment yesterday, like, why aren't you showing the GFS? Well, the GFS skill scores have been very low, and it's having a major problem with its boundary layer temperatures, but I'll show it to you anyway if you'd like to see it. So this is the GFS on the left, the European on the right. We're going to do this a lot during winter when both models perform better. And we play through the end of this week, so we're watching the system that brought all the rain to parts of the Mid-South, Midwest. By Thursday, it's trying to get into New England. That is in both models. We're going to watch a tropical system here sneak out of the East Pacific. This one's very important to the strength of the subtropical jet that's going to come across the United States. It's providing the heating that's going to amplify that. We're out here by Saturday, scattered storms along the east, as you can see. We're going to watch a system here on the southern side of some high pressure that comes out of Canada. There it is. That's by Sunday. So this is the front we're going to have to watch. See it right there? That's Sunday, its position. It's in the GFS as well, right in through here, although the precipitation amounts don't look quite as high as they do in the European. So we see that front diving, and here it is. There comes Lee. It's in both models. Now notice the GFS is a bit farther to the north than the European is. These maps have the same projection. There's the frontal boundary that we're going to be watching coming through the Midwest all the way down to the southern plains. And that front then dives through. This is the one that brings in all the rainfall into this area that's desperately needed. So see where the GFS has this front? This is next Wednesday morning. The European model has got it further back like this, so there is a difference in the position of the front. And then as we go from Wednesday into Thursday, so note, the European model, which is over on the right, is slower than the GFS, which is on the left of the position of that front. See, it's way back here like this, providing more rain into this corridor than the GFS is doing. So we see the hurricane out here. The GFS is more progressive, farther to the north, closer to shore. And then the operational runs, I'll just take them out there through day 10. This is where the European operational brings Lee. The GFS has already got it here, brushing the coast of New England. But the European after this is taking this and just turning it. So there's a timing difference. There's a location difference, and you can now see it in the operational runs. Now, we don't rely on operational runs out this far. I'm just showing it to you so you can see the differences, but we do not rely on these operational runs out this far. All right, that's why I showed you this, the super ensemble 8 days out where we expect things to be. All right, though, let's keep going with the discussion. What about precipitation? Well, over the next 7 days, which is before Lee gets here, this is what we're expecting. The current low rolling north is what helps deliver some of the rainfall you see here throughout New England, all the way down to the mid-Atlantic. We desperately need this rainfall in this area. It's been very, very dry. Same thing here. Extremely dry over the last few weeks. We've been talking about in every video. We need the rainfall that's coming through next week, this weekend and next week, right in here with that second front. Outside of that, we're mostly dry. Now, to show you the two models again compared to one another, this is the European model adding up this precipitation. So you can see the first system, the one that was over the Midwest, today, getting into tomorrow, spreading the rain into New England. We see the second front coming through here. This is Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday, delivering that desperately needed rainfall in the central plains of the United States. Now we're going to play this on out to next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Remember, the European model slower with the front. Remember, we kind of drew it in here. That's what's leaving more rain in and around the southern plains of the United States. And we're going to watch the heavy rainfall from Lee coming right in through here in the operational run. That's 10 days out in the Euro. Here's 10 days out in the GFS. So you can kind of see some differences. European model, GFS. European, GFS. We'll do the same thing with the probabilities. Now, the probability maps have a little bit different look on them because they're made using the ensemble members. So the GFS only has 31, whereas the European model has 101. So there's more, a larger sample size, if you will, for the creation of the probability in the European model. But this is the chance of getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days from the GFS. And if I flip this over to the European, that's the chance in the European. So note that the ensembles are really kind of losing Lee. They're not really sure on what it's going to do here just yet, but better chances in that same area we talked about with the multiple chances of rain coming in next week with the frontal boundary, but very wet New England. All right. So what about week 2? Well, here's the latest updates from the CPC, the European model, and the GFS. So again, what you've got going on here is mostly going to be coming from Lee. But take note that the CPC has got above average precipitation risk here, but it's not got the extreme just yet because we don't have strong evidence that this hurricane is going to hit land just yet. We're drier in the Midwest, we're drier in the Pacific Northwest, and that was a trend I was expecting here, given the new jet stream position coming into Canada, not coastal Washington and Oregon. All right, on the temperature side of this is what we got for today's highs. There's the cold front coming through, heat still racing up the East Coast, hot in Texas. We then go into Thursday, the colder air. Whoops, well, I'm sorry for that. There we go. We go from Thursday into Friday. The heat just stays anchored down here in the south as the cold front sweeps through the Midwest, gets to the east by the time we get into Sunday. Here's the second front. That's Sunday into Monday and Tuesday. That's the one that brings the better chances for rain here, and that's the leading edge of the front that we hope will directly away from the East Coast. All right, so it's right in through there. Look at that. Amarillo, 77 next Tuesday. What a break. Dallas, 86. That's going to feel like fall for folks down here, given how hot it was. How long do we see that temperature pattern lasting? This is the newest update from the European ensemble. Sorry about that. Next 5 days, day 5 through 10. So again, this was the bust in last week's forecast runs. Much cooler here than anticipated already now by the 11th through the 16th of September. And then day 10 through 15, we don't see that really just bouncing back in a big way yet. Remember where the ridge was expected to stay, so the flow comes in and around. It comes around like this, and that's where the ridge will be. So we see the warmer temperatures kind of anchored throughout the western United States, getting us out there to the 21st of September, which, by the way, would be the beginning of fall, astronomical fall. Okay, since we're out there that far, I want to skip over what I think the rest of September is going to look like because I expect volatility. I want to show you some new long-range data, though, and that's going to have a lot to do with what's going on with El Nino. Now, we look globally. We talk about this a lot. There's El Nino developing. We also have the positive phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. It's kind of like a similar circulation to El Nino, but if El Nino's coming and doing something like this, so the winds at the surface are anomalously in that direction, we get rising motion here, comes back over it, and there's sinking, so that's kind of going up in the atmosphere, not north-south. What you end up getting is more sinking here. The flow goes in this direction, rises over on this side near Africa, and comes back. So that's the circulation you get with a positive INSO over here. And I can't write. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do this. I'm trying to do it with my finger. But that's with the INSO side of it, and over here's the Indian Ocean dipole. Now we have other things. Look at all the warmth that's in the North Atlantic and still in the the North Pacific and the North Atlantic over here. And so as you think about this, what are these things doing to control our fall and winter setup? What I am watching, and this is what I want you to watch, is right in through here and right in through here. If we end up getting cold water in this area with an El Nino south and warm water in the North Pacific to the north of it, it sets up a very interesting winter storm track. Let's talk about it before we wrap this up. Here is the latest forecast from the European model on the strength of El Nino. It's got a pretty large spread. Some of the ensemble members getting up to about 2.8 degrees C above average. Some of them are stopping right around here, about 1.8. So there's a full degree swing. On average, it's hitting about 2 degrees. That would make this a very strong El Nino. Nowhere close to what the Australians are forecasting. They've got this up around 3.2 degrees C above average, so we're not even anywhere close to that. But this is still a strong El Nino event that will likely peak in December or early January. That's typical of an El Nino. So it looks something like this on the ocean temperatures. This is September, October, as we played this for, there's October, November, December, that would be our peak. So we're looking at those ocean temperatures out here, but also up against South America. This is January, February, and March, and we're going to naturally see a bit of a fade to that. What I want to do is this. Notice in December and January, see the near normal temperatures here and the cooler water in the North Atlantic. That stripe right in through there is what you want to watch, because this will set up the contrast in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere to have heat south and cooler north. And the jet stream is going to live right on the boundary. And that will be the polar jet. Forgive me, the subtropical jet. The polar jet comes over the top of this and meets up as they go to New England. Now, that particular setup in the jet stream can lead to some very, very, well, I would call it fun winter weather. Other people would not. Let me show you what I mean. If I come in here and I show you the seasonal precipitation anomalies, let's click on it there, for November, December, January. So the subtropical jet comes in like this and out like that, tends to lead to very active weather in this corridor. You say, oh, is it going to be really dry in the Ohio Valley? No, probably not. We'll actually have quite a bit of storm activity that'll roll through the Mid-South as well. The risk is always going to be here in the Pacific Northwest because the jet's going to go over the top of this, come down and meet up right into this area. So this is typically a wetter setup for California. This will be drought eliminating down here across the south, which parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi are having their driest last 4 months on record. And it's going to be extremely wet up the East Coast. A lot of what we call Miller B storm systems and Miller A storm systems that kind of roll up like that. That's my forecast that I'm thinking right now. If we get in just to winter, this is December, January, February. Now it's really showing up. And even though you see drier in this area, don't think it's going to be drier, because we will have systems rolling through this area. I am expecting a sizable decrease in U.S. drought area, specifically down here south and over the Midwest, not in the Pacific Northwest going into this winter pattern. And speaking of kind of this winter pattern, there are some other models that are in, like look at what the Canadians are forecasting for winter. Much more aggressive on the drought that's in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, but wet into California, wetter in the central United States, and very wet here. And we see this a lot when global ocean temperatures are as warm as they are and an El Nino is brewing. So there is evidence to back this winter forecast up, as you see here, but I think this is going to be one that's going to be kind of one to remember. I think there's going to be a lot of activity this winter that's going to keep us kind of on our toes. Could I tell you when this winter is going to be most active? Will it be earlier or later, in the middle? No, we just aren't there yet. We haven't quite yet seen all the sub-seasonal factors set up, but this is some of the latest evidence that we've got. Now, we've been keeping an eye also on what's happening in South America, so I'm going to switch back to the European seasonal model. I'm going to take you to the same time period for South America. Now, later in the time period, we are expecting closer to normal rains to show up in Brazil, but take a look. The start of the monsoon may be a bit slow. This is the October, November, December, and we see driest conditions up here. This is in a state called Pará, and down here this would be Mato Grosso, and then you're down into southern Brazil here from Mato Grosso do Sul all the way through Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul. So this is where we're expecting wet early, Paraguay, Uruguay as well, and Argentina. But just note that there could be a bit of a slowdown north in the strength of the monsoon. We can blame this on a lot of things. El Nino's part of it. The weaker trade winds over here in the Atlantic are part of it as well, not grabbing that moisture and diving it into northern parts of Brazil. So main story here is that even though you see this showing up drier, remember to be just a little bit on the drier side of average, they still get plenty of precipitation. So what we all need to be watching is how quickly they plant. And on my website, ag-wx.com, you can slide over here to the bottom, go to South American maps. You can see the temperatures over the next 5 to 10 days. You can also see the precipitation, be it anomalies, or you can look at it in terms of totals. So they're not going to start planting too fast yet, because over the next 10 days, a significant portion of Brazil is not expecting rainfall. So they have to get more moisture before they get going. All right, so we kind of covered a lot, but it's going to be important for us to watch each day the evolution of this forecast for our harvest in North America, and then for the planting in South America and this hurricane season, among other things. So I'll keep you up to date. We'll talk again tomorrow morning. Thanks.